4.3 million people visited Jamaica in 2024. That was a record. The island generated $4.3 billion in tourism revenue in a single year. A significant number of those visitors returned home, having learned things they should have known before they boarded the plane. Some lost money at the airport currency counter. Some used an unlicensed taxi and spent the rest of the trip on edge. Some discovered what medical evacuation to the United States actually costs without travel insurance. $30,000 on the low end. Some arrived to find their resort closed because they had not been informed that Hurricane Melissa had struck the western end of the island 4 months earlier. Number 3 on this list covers something that most visitors assume they already understand, and that assumption is wrong. It has nothing to do with crime or weather. It concerns something millions of people take for granted before they leave home. It will be addressed in full when we reach it. This is not a promotional guide. Jamaica does not require one. What it requires, and what any traveler in 2026 requires, is information that travel brochures do not volunteer. These 15 points cover what is documented, what has changed, and what is relevant to anyone planning a trip to Jamaica right now, whether you are a Jamaican in London returning after years away, a Guyanese family in New York booking a Caribbean holiday, a Trinidadian in Toronto planning a honeymoon, or a first-time visitor from anywhere in the diaspora. Number 1. Jamaica is the third largest island in the Caribbean, and most visitors do not travel beyond a narrow corridor around their resort. That is a practical observation, not a criticism. Jamaica spans approximately 235 kilometers from east to west and 80 kilometers from north to south at its widest point. The island sits atop a submerged mountain range. Its highest point, Blue Mountain Peak, rises to 7,402 feet, the highest elevation in the Caribbean outside of the Dominican Republic. The scale of the island has direct consequences for trip planning. This is not a small destination where major attractions are 30 minutes apart in any direction. Montego Bay to Ocho Rios is roughly 2 hours by road. Ocho Rios to Port Antonio is another 2 hours. Kingston is at the opposite end of the island from Negril. Depending on road conditions and traffic, that drive runs between 3 and 5 hours. An itinerary that tries to cover Negril, Dunn's River Falls, Kingston, and Port Antonio within 5 days will result in a holiday spent largely in transit. The practical approach is to select one base, either the north coast corridor of Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, and Falmouth, or the south and east, and plan excursions from there. Kingston warrants its own dedicated stay. It is not viable as a day trip from the north coast. Jamaica has 3 international airports. Sangster International in Montego Bay processes the majority of tourist arrivals. Norman Manley International serves Kingston. Ian Fleming International in Ocho Rios handles regional and charter operations. Flying into the airport nearest to your primary destination will save meaningful time. Flights into Montego Bay are often cheaper, but for travelers heading to Ocho Rios or the eastern parishes, that price difference is partially offset by the transfer time required. Number 2. Jamaica's official language is English. Most visitors also encounter patois, and those are not the same thing. The island's colonial history under Britain established English as the language of government, education, media, and formal business. Standard English is used in hotels, airports, tour operations, and any context that involves direct service to visitors. There is no language barrier for English speakers arriving in Jamaica. Patois, also written as patois, is a Creole English with its own vocabulary, grammar structure, and pronunciation. It is spoken by more than 2.5 million people. Despite that, it has not been officially recognized as a separate language by Jamaican institutions. That debate has been ongoing for decades. In practice, most Jamaicans shift naturally into Standard English when speaking with visitors. In local markets, between taxi drivers, in conversations that are not directed at you specifically, patois is what you will hear. Understanding very little of it is normal and requires no apology. A small number of patois phrases are worth knowing. Wagwan is the standard greeting, equivalent to "what's going on." The expected response is "mi de ya," meaning "I'm here," which carries the sense of everything being fine. Iri means something is good or positive. Little more means goodbye or see you later. These are not essential. Using them correctly tends to be well received. Number 3. Cannabis is decriminalized in Jamaica, not legal, and transporting any quantity across an international border on departure is a federal criminal offense in every major destination country, regardless of what Jamaican law permits. This is the point where the legal reality diverges most sharply from what most visitors believe before they arrive. Jamaica's Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act of 2015 decriminalized possession of up to 2 ounces, 56 grams, of cannabis for adults. Being found with that amount does not result in a criminal charge. It results in a fine of 500 Jamaican dollars, equivalent to approximately $3 at current exchange rates. The legal structure treats it comparably to a minor traffic infringement. Possession above 2 ounces is a criminal matter. Trafficking cannabis in Jamaica carries a maximum penalty of 35 years imprisonment. Licensed cannabis dispensaries operate across the island, and they are accessible to tourists. Most will issue a visitor's medical permit on site, typically for a fee of between $10 and $20, which authorizes purchase for medical or therapeutic purposes. A home country prescription is not required. Some dispensaries provide on-site medical evaluations. Purchasing from a licensed dispensary is the only legal route for visitors. Street purchases are unregulated, carry no quality assurance, and are not legal. Public consumption remains prohibited under Jamaican law. Decriminalization covers possession, not smoking in public spaces, on beaches, in restaurants, or in any area where smoking is generally prohibited. Violations are ticketable. The cross-border question is separate entirely, and it is where the serious legal exposure lies. Cannabis purchased legally in Jamaica, possessed within the legal Jamaican limit, cannot be carried out of the country into the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, or any country where it remains a controlled substance at the federal or national level. The legal status in Jamaica is irrelevant at the border of your destination country. U.S. Customs and Border Protection applies U.S. federal law. UK Border Force applies UK law. Canadian Border Services Agency applies Canadian federal law. All three of those frameworks treat cannabis as a controlled substance, regardless of where it was purchased or what amount is involved. People have been arrested at customs for carrying amounts that were entirely lawful the previous day in Jamaica. That outcome is foreseeable, and the legal defenses available are limited. For cruise ship passengers specifically, cannabis cannot be brought back onto a vessel flagged in the United States. U.S.-flagged ships operate under U.S. federal maritime law. People have been removed from cruises at the next port for this. The dispensary receipt from Jamaica provides no protection. Number 4. Jamaica drives on the left, and the road conditions after dark are materially more dangerous than they are during daylight hours. Left-hand traffic is a legacy of British colonial rule codified in Jamaica's Road Traffic Regulations of 2022. For drivers from the United States, most of Canada, continental Europe, or any right-hand traffic country, the adjustment period is typically 15 to 20 minutes of active concentration before the orientation begins to feel manageable. Rental vehicles have the steering wheel on the right. Overtaking is done on the right. At roundabouts and left turns, the instinct will be incorrect for the first hour of driving. The adjustment to left-hand driving is manageable. The road network beyond the main tourist corridors requires more sustained attention. Jamaica's A1, A2, and A3 highways are the primary intercity links. They are functional roads, but they are not the equivalent of North American or European motorways. Sections suffer from inadequate repair, limited signage, and inconsistent traffic markings. The B highways and rural roads are significantly narrower, shared with heavy trucks, route buses, pedestrian cyclists, and in some areas, free-ranging livestock. After dark, conditions change considerably. Street lighting ends at the edge of most towns. Unmarked speed reductions, known locally as sleeping policemen, are widespread and appear without signage. According to Jamaica Constabulary Force data from 2025, 78% of tourist-involved road incidents occur after 6 p.m. The U.S. State Department has a standing restriction preventing its government employees in Jamaica from driving between cities at night. That restriction applies to professional travelers whose work involves frequent international movement. The same caution is appropriate for visitors. The practical guidance: arrive at your accommodation before sunset during the first few days of any trip. If night driving becomes necessary, confine it to the North Coast Highway. For intercity transfers, a pre-booked private transfer is a reasonable alternative to self-driving. For taxis, use only licensed vehicles displaying red and white PP license plates or taxis arranged through your hotel. The State Department also restricts its employees from using public buses in Jamaica, citing documented overcrowding and safety concerns. That guidance applies equally to visitors. Do not accept rides from unlicensed operators. Number 5. The U.S. travel advisory for Jamaica was lowered in 2025. The advisory level changed. The underlying risk conditions did not. On May 29, 2025, the United States State Department reduced Jamaica's travel advisory from Level 3, reconsider travel, to Level 2, exercise increased caution. The Level 3 designation had been in place since July 2024. Jamaican government officials had consistently and publicly argued that the designation was inflating risk perceptions and suppressing tourism. During a diplomatic visit to Kingston in March 2025, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Jamaican officials that the advisory would be re-evaluated. The downgrade followed in late May. Jamaica's Level 2 designation now matches the advisory level assigned to France, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Belgium. That is a useful point of reference for calibrating what Level 2 means in practice. The State Department's language when announcing the change is worth noting precisely. The department stated, "There were no changes to the risk indicators. Crime, health, and natural disaster risk remained unchanged as factors. The level adjustment reflected a decrease in violent crime since 2024, but the department simultaneously stated that violent crime in Jamaica remains statistically high throughout the country. Jamaica's homicide rate, as reported by the Jamaican government, stands at 40.1 per 100,000 people. That figure ranks among the highest in the Western Hemisphere. Specific communities remain designated at Level 4. Do not travel, the highest risk classification the State Department uses. These include Steertown and the Buckfield neighborhood near Ocho Rios in St. Anne's Parish, Spanish Town, Central Village, and multiple areas within Portmore, including Nago Head, Newland, Portmore Lane, Gregory Park, and Waterford in St. Catherine's Parish, alt of Clarendon Parish, with the exception of transit on the T1 and A2 highways. The Vineyard District community between Salt Spring and Burnt Savannah in St. Elizabeth, and Logwood and Orange Bay in Hanover Parish. None of these are tourist areas. Visitors on standard itineraries have no occasion to enter them. For members of the Jamaican diaspora who have family in these parishes, and many do, this information requires direct consideration before making plans. The advisory confirms that tourist zones see lower rates of violent crime than the rest of the country. It also documents that the U.S. Embassy routinely receives reports of sexual assaults involving tourists at resorts, including all-inclusive properties. Response times from Jamaican police to serious criminal incidents are reported as slow. Prosecution to verdict and sentence, when arrests are made, is described as infrequent. This information exists to inform decisions, not to override them. Tourist police units operate in Montego Bay, Negril, and Ocho Rios. For police assistance anywhere on the island, the number is 119. For ambulance or fire services, dial 110. Number 6. Hurricane Melissa struck Jamaica in October 2025 as a Category 5 storm. Recovery is advanced but uneven across the island. Melissa made landfall on October 28, 2025, near New Hope in Westmoreland Parish. Sustained winds reached 185 miles per hour, with gusts above 250 miles per hour. At least 45 people were killed. 13 remained missing at the time of initial reporting. More than 96 others were injured. The World Bank placed physical damage at $8.8 billion. Melissa was the strongest hurricane to strike Jamaica in recorded history, exceeding the previous benchmark set by Hurricane Gilbert in 1988. The parishes that absorbed the most damage were St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Hanover, St. James, and Trelawney. These are not remote or peripheral locations. St. James contains Montego Bay. Trelawney, situated between Montego Bay and Ocho Rios, includes Falmouth and the Luminous Lagoon. The Inter-American Development Bank projected a GDP contraction of 4.5% for fiscal year 2025 to 2026 as a direct result of the storm. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett confirmed that approximately 30% of Jamaica's tourism assets sustained damage. The island had been tracking toward a 2% increase in arrivals for 2025 before the storm. Instead, the full-year figure came in approximately 20% below the 2024 record. As of May 2026, all 3 international airports are fully operational. Sangster International in Montego Bay, Norman Manley International in Kingston, and Ian Fleming International in Ocho Rios have returned to normal commercial schedules with major airlines. The North Coast Corridor, Ocho Rios, Runaway Bay, Port Antonio, was largely unaffected by the storm. Dunn's River Falls in Ocho Rios has reopened. Tourist infrastructure in Negril has largely resumed operations. On the Sandals Resorts timeline, 5 properties reopened on December 6, 2025. Sandals Royal Plantation, Sandals Ochi, Sandals Dunn's River, Sandals Negril, and Beaches Negril. Sandals Montego Bay, Sandals Royal Caribbean, and Sandals South Coast are scheduled to reopen on May 30, 2026, following structural repairs and renovations. Sandals Executive Chairman Adam Stewart told an audience of travel advisors in December, "There is no storm that's going to stop Jamaica. For any traveler booking in 2026, the essential step is to confirm directly with any specific property or attraction that it is open and accepting guests before committing a deposit. The recovery is substantive and accelerating, but it is not uniform across all areas of the island." Number 7. Jamaica's healthcare system operates under significant risk or constraints, and visitors who arrive without travel insurance face potentially catastrophic financial exposure in a medical emergency. The U.S. State Department publishes the following on its Jamaica advisory page. Basic and specialized medical care may not be available in many parts of Jamaica. Ambulance services are not always staffed with EMTs and are not always readily available, particularly in rural areas. Most hospitals and doctors in Jamaica do not accept U.S. health insurance. U.S. Medicare and Medicaid have no application outside the United States. Air ambulance service from Jamaica to the United States starts at $30,000 US. That figure, $30,000, is the floor, not an average. It is the minimum cost of a medical evacuation under straightforward conditions. Complex cases cost considerably more. Jamaica's public health system comprises 24 hospitals and approximately 318 clinics and health centers as of 2025. The public system is available without charge to residents at point of delivery, but documented limitations include resource shortfalls and extended wait times. Private hospitals require upfront payment before admitting patients. Healthcare facilities in western Jamaica sustained significant damage from Hurricane Melissa, and some remain in reduced operational capacity. In the main tourist areas, private facilities are available. In Montego Bay, Bay West Wellness Hospital and Hospital in Montego Bay are the primary private options for visitors. Kingston has the highest concentration of specialized medical services on the island. The practical requirement before travel is comprehensive travel insurance that explicitly includes medical evacuation coverage. Standard domestic health plans, many employer health plans, and credit card travel benefits do not include medical evacuation as a matter of course. Verify the specific terms of whatever coverage you have or intend to purchase. Do not assume. Prescription medication should be packed in their original containers for the full duration of the trip, plus additional supply as a buffer. Insulin and other common medications can be difficult to source outside Kingston. If you carry controlled substances, bring the relevant documentation. Number 8. 3 currency errors account for a significant share of the money visitors unnecessarily lose in Jamaica before they have settled into their first day. Jamaica's official currency is the Jamaican dollar. As of May 2026, the exchange rate sits at approximately 157 to 160 Jamaican dollars per US dollar. The rate reached its highest point in the past year, 160.6 in October 2025, in the days surrounding Hurricane Melissa's landfall. Almost all local pricing is in Jamaican dollars. The numbers are large in nominal terms, and disorientation about actual costs is a consistent experience for first-time visitors. The first error: exchanging currency at the airport. Exchange counters at Sangster International and Norman Manley International offer rates that are typically 5 to 10% below the mid-market rate. On a $500 US exchange, that gap represents $25 to $50 in real terms lost in a single transaction before you have left the arrivals hall. The practical approach is to exchange only enough at the airport to cover the immediate transfer and first night's tips, and convert the remainder at a cambio. Cambios are Jamaica's dedicated currency exchange businesses operating in all major towns, including Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, Negril, and Kingston. They post rates on visible boards, and those rates are typically within 1 to 2% of the mid-market rate. A passport is required for identification. The second error, accepting dynamic currency conversion at an ATM. When a Jamaican ATM offers to charge a transaction in your home currency rather than Jamaican dollars, decline. The ATM's conversion rate is consistently less favorable than the rate your home bank applies to a transaction processed in JMD. This option is presented as a convenience. It functions as a fee. The third error, transacting exclusively in US dollars. American dollars are accepted across most tourist-facing businesses, markets, and transport. They are not the optimal currency for those transactions. Taxi drivers and market vendors regularly offer more favorable pricing when paid in Jamaican dollars, because paying in JMD signals familiarity with local value. Use JMD for local purchases. Use USD as a backup where no other option is available. On tipping, service workers in Jamaica depend on gratuities as a material part of their income. At restaurants, 10 to 15% of the bill is standard if a service charge has not already been added. Check the bill, as automatic service charges are common. Hotel porters typically expect 1 to 2 US dollars per bag. Housekeeping staff typically receive 2 to 5 US dollars per day. Number 9. Jamaican cuisine is the product of a specific and documented history, and several of its most recognized elements are misunderstood by visitors before they arrive. The national dish is ackee and saltfish. Ackee is a fruit with origins in West Africa, introduced to Jamaica in the 18th century. Prepared correctly, sautéed with salted codfish, Scotch bonnet peppers, onions, and tomatoes. The flesh resembles scrambled eggs in texture. It is the default Jamaican breakfast and the dish with the deepest cultural significance on the island. Jerk cooking has a specific origin that the international popularity of jerk chicken tends to obscure. Jerk is both a method and a spice combination. It originates with the Maroons, the community of enslaved Africans who escaped British colonial plantations and established autonomous communities in Jamaica's interior highlands from the 1600s onward. Concealing themselves from British forces required cooking meat without producing visible smoke. The solution was to cook underground over coals and pimento wood. The technique spread from that context into the broader Jamaican culinary culture over the following centuries. Boston Jerk Center in Portland Parish on the northeast coast is widely regarded as the original site of jerk cooking and remains an active destination. The Jamaican beef patty is the island's primary street food, a flaky pastry shell filled with spiced ground beef or chicken, lobster, saltfish, or vegetable depending on the vendor, eaten from the paper bag it is served in, often alongside cocoa bread. It is available from roadside vendors, local bakeries, and the Weechie beef and pasties chains. Other items that appear on most Jamaican tables: rice and peas, which refers to kidney beans cooked in coconut milk with spices, served as a standard accompaniment to most main courses. Festival, a sweet fried cornmeal dough; callaloo, a leafy green used widely in Jamaican cooking; curried goat, introduced by Indian indentured laborers in the 19th century and now fully integrated into Jamaican cuisine; an oxtail, slow cooked in a braised preparation. To drink, sorrel, made from dried hibiscus flowers with ginger and spices, is associated with the Christmas season but produced year-round. Fresh coconut water is available from street vendors across the island. Rum punch is available everywhere. Red Stripe beer is the domestic lager. Appleton Estate rum is the most internationally recognized Jamaican spirit. Blue Mountain coffee carries a specific legal designation. To qualify, beans must be grown and harvested between 3,000 and 5,500 feet above sea level within the designated Blue Mountain region. The growing conditions at that altitude, persistent mist, cool temperatures, rich volcanic soil, produce a slow ripening cycle that results in a coffee noted for its smooth flavor, minimal bitterness, and a finish described as nutty and faintly chocolatey. Japan has maintained long-standing trade agreements for the majority of the annual Blue Mountain crop. The volume of export means that certified Blue Mountain coffee is genuinely scarce on the island itself. The product, marketed as Blue Mountain across resort areas and airport shops, is frequently a blend rather than single-origin certified coffee. To find verified Blue Mountain coffee, visit larger supermarkets in Kingston or seek out growers directly in the parishes of St. Andrew, Portland, St. Thomas, and St. Mary. One more food-related fact. Jamaica, a tropical island that grows no cranberries, ranks among the world's highest per capita consumers of cranberries. All of the supply is imported. Demand remains consistently high. There is no single clear explanation for this in the available literature. It is documented and it is unusual. Number 10. Jamaica holds 3 world records that are not typically featured in standard travel material. The first, Jamaica has more churches per square mile than any other country in the world. The Guinness World Records has verified this. The National Library of Jamaica estimates 2.75 churches per square mile, with a total of over 1,600 churches nationwide, across a country of approximately 2.7 million people. Many congregations hold services that run 4 hours or more. The concentration of religious institutions exists alongside Jamaica's internationally recognized entertainment culture. The dance halls, the rum bars, the beach parties, without those things being in contradiction. The island does not resolve into a single cultural identity. The second, Jamaica has more rum bars per capita than any other country. The rum industry in Jamaica dates to the colonial period of the sugar trade, and the culture of the rum bar as a community institution has remained continuous through the centuries since. Appleton Estate and dozens of smaller producers and independent blenders operate across the parishes. Red Stripe holds the domestic beer market. The rum bar density is a byproduct of both historical production volume and sustained cultural practice. The third, the luminous lagoon near Falmouth in Trelawney Parish, is one of the brightest bioluminescent bodies of water in the world. The phenomenon is produced by dinoflagellates, microscopic single-celled organisms that emit blue-green light when physically disturbed. A swimmer moving through the water, a boat passing through the lagoon, a hand dragged across the surface, all of these produce a visible glow. The lagoon's exceptional brightness is attributed to the density of dinoflagellates in the water and the mixing of salt water from the sea with fresh water from the Martha Brae River. Unlike the bioluminescent bays in Puerto Rico, where environmental fragility has restricted or eliminated swimming access, visitors can enter the water at Jamaica's luminous lagoon. Tours run nightly from Falmouth, typically lasting 2 to 4 hours. Visibility is best on moonless nights. The December to April window, when cloud cover is reduced, produces the clearest conditions. Tour pricing is posted by local operators at the site. Number 11. Jamaica's ecological diversity is extensive, and the majority of visitors on standard resort itineraries do not encounter it. The island's combination of geographic isolation and significant altitude range, from sea level to over 7,000 feet, created conditions for a high concentration of species found nowhere else. Of Jamaica's approximately 3,000 plant species, more than 1/3 are endemic. 250 bird species are present on the island, including 27 that exist only in Jamaica. The Blue and John Crow Mountains National Park occupies more than 100,000 acres in the eastern parishes. It carries UNESCO World Heritage designation and contains species that predate human settlement on the island. The Homerus swallowtail butterfly, found only within this park, is the largest butterfly species in the Western Hemisphere, with a wingspan reaching 6 inches. American crocodiles inhabit the wetlands of the Black River Great Morass in St. Elizabeth. For visitors who want to engage with Jamaica's natural environment rather than its coastline, the primary access points are the Blue Mountain Coffee Farm tours in the high parishes, the bamboo raft trips on the Rio Grande in Port Antonio, 3 hours per trip at approximately $1,500 Jamaican dollars per person through Rio Grande rafting tour, and the trail approaches to Blue Mountain Peak itself. The summit hike covers approximately 11 kilometers of steep terrain. Most guided departures begin around 2 a.m. to position hikers at the peak for sunrise. Number 12. Timing a visit to Jamaica involves a genuine trade-off between weather risk, price, crowd levels, and the hurricane season calendar. Jamaica maintains a warm, humid climate throughout the year. Peak temperatures fall between June and September. The coolest and driest period runs from December through March, which aligns with the island's peak tourism season. The Atlantic hurricane season operates from June 1st through November 30th. Hurricane Melissa, which made landfall on October 28, 2025, is the most extreme recent example of what the late season can produce. Before Melissa, the comparable benchmark was Hurricane Gilbert in 1988. The December to April window carries the lowest hurricane risk, the most favorable weather conditions on the north coast, and the highest concentration of seasonal events. This period includes Carnival season and the Jamaica Jazz and Blues Festival. The shoulder seasons of May to June and November offer lower prices and reduced visitor volume. They also sit closer to the active portion of the hurricane season. Travel insurance is relevant at any time of year, but it is particularly consequential in these shoulder periods. Jamaica's north and south coasts have different rainfall profiles. The North Coast, which contains Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, Negril, and the majority of tourist infrastructure, is significantly drier than the South Coast. Rain can occur on both coasts in any month, but the North Coast's relative dryness is one of the factors that drove resort concentration there. Number 13. Jamaica does not require a visa for visitors from major English-speaking countries, but entry documentation and pre-arrival paperwork carry practical implications worth understanding in advance. Citizens of the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, European Union member states, and Australia do not require a visa to enter Jamaica for stays of up to 90 days. Entry is processed through standard immigration on arrival. Passport validity should cover the full period of intended stay. The standard international travel guidance recommends validity of at least 6 months beyond departure. On the island, the passport functions as the primary identification document. Cambios require it for currency exchange, car rental companies require it, police and immigration checks may request it. Carry it or a certified copy at all times. Jamaica requires completion of an immigration and customs form on arrival. This form was previously issued on the aircraft as the C5 form. It can now be completed in advance through the Jamaica Customs Agency's online platform, which reduces processing time at the airport. Completing it before departure is practical and requires no special access or registration beyond the agency's website. For cruise passengers specifically, the cannabis provisions discussed under Item 3 apply at the point of reboarding the vessel, not only at the destination country's border. U.S.-flagged cruise ships operate under U.S. federal law throughout the voyage. Cannabis brought back from Jamaica onto such a vessel is subject to the same federal legal framework as cannabis carried across a land or air border. Number 14. The cultural context that most travel guides summarize in a paragraph is, in practice, more layered than it is typically presented. Jamaican hospitality is well documented and widely reported by visitors. It is not unlimited and it does not extend to being treated dismissively. The patience for condescension or disrespect is short. Visitors who mistake warmth for indifference to how they are treating people will encounter a correction. Rastafarianism is a theological tradition, not a cultural aesthetic. It developed in Jamaica in the 1930s, drawing from the writings and philosophy of Marcus Garvey and the religious significance assigned to Haile Selassie, then known as Rastafari, upon his coronation as Emperor of Ethiopia in 1930. The faith holds that people of African descent are among the displaced 12 tribes of Israel, that Jamaica constitutes a period of exile, and that Zion, understood as a return to Africa, is the eschatological destination. It emerged as both a spiritual framework and a political response to the conditions of poor black Jamaicans under colonial governance. At any Rastafarian ceremony or gathering, photography without explicit prior permission is not appropriate. Participation is by invitation. The practice of treating the community as a cultural performance is recognized as disrespectful, and that recognition is not confined to the community itself. Beaches in Jamaica are, by law, public. The physical reality is more complicated. Resort properties frequently fence off sections of beach adjacent to their facilities and restrict access to guests. Informal barriers, fencing, signage, the positioning of loungers further limit what is technically available to non-guests. The most accessible and genuinely public beaches include Doctor's Cave Beach in Montego Bay, which charges a modest admission, and 7 Mile Beach in Negril. At local markets, with taxi drivers, and in transactions with independent vendors, price negotiation is normal and expected. Opening below the stated price and settling toward a middle figure is standard practice. Conducting the negotiation in Jamaican dollars indicates knowledge of local pricing, and it typically results in more accurate offers. For Jamaican diaspora members returning after time abroad, the pricing dynamic that affects visitors generally also applies to returning Jamaicans, at least in the initial stages of any transaction in tourist-adjacent areas. Vendors and operators may calibrate their initial pricing based on a perceived connection to higher-income countries. This is not unique to Jamaica, and most returning Jamaicans navigate it without difficulty. Awareness of it in advance is useful. Number 15. The current state of Jamaica's tourism infrastructure in 2026 reflects a recovery that is advanced in some areas and incomplete in others. All three international airports, Sangster International in Montego Bay, Norman Manley International in Kingston, and Ian Fleming International in Ocho Rios, are fully operational on regular commercial schedules. The North Coast Tourism Corridor is largely functional. Ocho Rios, Runaway Bay, Discovery Bay, and Falmouth are operating. The main resort areas in Negril are open. Kingston sustained no significant storm damage and has continued normal operations throughout. Dunn's River Falls in Ocho Rios has reopened. The Luminous Lagoon is operating. The Bob Marley Museum at 9 Hope Road in Kingston and the Golden Eye Estate in St. Mary are receiving visitors. Rio Grande rafting operations in Port Antonio are running. The western parishes, particularly St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland, where Melissa made direct landfall, are still in active reconstruction. Healthcare facilities in those parishes sustained damage and are operating at reduced capacity. Some accommodation and attraction inventory in that region remains unavailable. Sandals Montego Bay, Sandals Royal Caribbean, and Sandals South Coast are scheduled to reopen on May 30th, 2026 following structural repairs and renovations. Several properties across the island are using the recovery period to undertake upgrades that were already planned, meaning some inventory will relaunch in materially better condition than it was in before the storm. 5 major development projects are proceeding with construction. Tourism Minister Bartlett confirmed these in December 2025. A Unico Hotel Collection and Hard Rock Hotel Resort Complex, the Pinnacle Luxury Residences, the Harmony Cove Luxury Resort and Residential Complex, an expansion of the Grand Palladium Jamaica, and a 350-room Bahia Principe Hotel. The Inter-American Development Bank projects GDP recovery to 3.3% in fiscal year 2027 to 2028. The Jamaica Tourist Board and Tourism Ministry project full room inventory recovery by the end of 2026. Jamaica recorded 4.3 million visitors in 2024 under conditions that included a Level 3 U.S. travel advisory for the final 5 months of the year. It then absorbed the most powerful hurricane in its recorded history in October 2025. Within 8 weeks of that storm, the majority of the island's tourism sector was operational again. In May 2025, the U.S. State Department downgraded the travel advisory to Level 2, bringing Jamaica's risk classification into alignment with France and the United Kingdom. The island is not what it was in 2024, and it is not what it was in the immediate aftermath of Melissa. Room inventory that was damaged is being repaired and in some cases replaced with newer construction. 5 development projects are simultaneously underway. The airports are running. The North Coast Corridor is open. The Jamaican diaspora across London, New York, Toronto, and Miami has maintained a more accurate understanding of the island than the average international headline has conveyed. Years of watching crime data, hurricane coverage, and advisory ratings produce simplified portrayals of a place that is considerably more complex than those summaries suggest. These 15 points are not an argument against visiting Jamaica. They are the factual framework that allows a visit to be planned accurately. Without the airport currency losses, without the unlicensed taxi, without arriving at a closed resort, without a medical emergency that costs $30,000 because the travel insurance was skipped. Jamaica is open, the airports are operating, the jerk centers are running, the Luminous Lagoon is active on moonless nights. And Blue Mountain Coffee, when you find the genuine certified product, delivers exactly what its reputation describes.